Good afternoon, I'm Sunil Jain. I'm the opinion editor of the Financial Express. Welcome to one of our series on what the budget is going to hold for us. Today we'll be here tomorrow at the same time probably, but what we've got today is the economic survey. So the question is, what is the economic survey telling us about the economy, and what is it telling us about the budget? I mean, do we get any pointers about the budget? Firstly, let's make it very clear that there is very little that the economic survey actually tells you which is new about the budget or about the state of the economy, because you get this data out on a quarterly basis, we get some data out on a monthly basis, some even on a weekly basis. So what that data is telling us, and the economic survey just puts it together in one place for all of us, what that data is telling us is what we've all known. Just to recapitulate, what it's telling us is that the reason why we're talking about a 5.5% growth in the current year is that investments have just completely collapsed. They were about 38% of GDP about 4 years ago. They're about 31 to 32, 30% to 32% right now. We're talking about fresh project starts, which means that the fresh announcements that industrialists make, that I'm going to set up this project. POSCO said I'm going to set up a steel plant. Now those fresh project starts were about 24 lakh crores, a couple of years ago. They're down to about 4 lakh crores right now. So that's where we are. So basically what the economic survey is telling us is that this is the reason why growth is down. And then it tells us how do we kickstart the growth. So it tells us you need to clear those projects. That's why the government has a cabinet committee on investments, to clear the projects. The economic survey is telling us is that the government deficits are too high. So the government is actually borrowing too much money from the overall pool, and then there's less money for industry to use. So the interest rates are high because of that. So it's telling us that. There's a brand new chapter this year in the economic survey which says that we do need a change in labor laws, but it doesn't have the usual hire and fire, because that's difficult. So what it says is that, like in Germany, we need an apprentice act. So there should be a formal system of bringing in people, from training schools and get them to work in industry. They'll work as apprentices, so they'll not be permanent employees, but they have a future ready for them. So it gives industry flexibility as well as the ability to train people. So I think that is a brand new thing in the economic survey. Hopefully we'll see some kind of announcement on it tomorrow. The last thing the economic survey is telling us is that even as we hope to move to a higher growth trajectory next year, they're talking about 6.5% growth next year. So 5.5 this year in FY13, in the year that's going to end, becoming 6.5 in the next year. The economic survey tells us that this is all very touch and go. And I'll tell you why. So it says, for example, if you increase your growth too much, there'll be an increase in imports. So your current account deficit, which means that the extra imports that you make over what you earn by way of exports, the current account deficit is just getting too large. It's getting very difficult to manage. So when we have a greater demand for dollars than we have supply of, then the rupee can go all the way to 60. So the rupee goes to 60, inflation increases, things get more difficult. So that current account deficit is this real worry. So that's what the survey is telling us. What are the pointers for the budget? Now I think it's very, very clear. The economic survey is telling us we are going to, I'm sorry to say this, we are going to get a food security bill, which is very bad news because it increases the deficit, it increases expenditure, and it puts a lot of burden on, in terms of the system, in terms of procuring grain. So you're going to get a food security bill. I think that's very, very clear. The second thing that, that the economic survey is telling us is that, we need to get those projects going. So while industry, while economists, while analysts, while people like me and people like you listening tomorrow we're going to be focused on one thing. The fiscal deficit is 4.8% of GDP. The fiscal deficit is 4.9% of GDP. That's going to be this big focus tomorrow. But what the survey is pointing out to us, and what every industrialist knows, is this is probably the least important part of the economic scenario in the year to come. What is important about the economic scenario is A, getting those projects cleared. Secondly, even if you've got a high deficit, if you get the existing projects cleared, these are projects which are stuck. So I set up a power plant. I've invested 5,000 crore rupees in that power plant, and there's not a single unit of power coming out because there's no coal, because it's stuck in some environment clearance. So without increasing the saving rate, if I can get coal and I can get this power off the ground, so suddenly there's this large investment which is available to India without a single naya paisa of fresh saving. So, so what's going to be critical is not just the deficit number that you see tomorrow, but the ability of the government to be clearing projects. I think that is very, very critical. And that's going to be something which we need to watch out. One last thing that the survey is warning us about, in a very oblique manner, it doesn't actually say so in so many words, but in the past, if you look at a 10-year stream, it's a 10-year period, the larger years of fiscal deficits, there have been periods when expenses have gone out of whack, in 2009 for example. But the largest problem that we've got, and we've seen this, we'll see this tomorrow for the year just went by, for the Pranab Mukherjee budget year, the biggest problem that we're seeing is the finance minister being very aggressive with his budgeting. So Pranab Mukherjee budgeted a huge tax increase. We're going to see a big deficit out there when the numbers are presented tomorrow. Secondly, if Mr. Chidambaram is very aggressive and he believes that we're going to have a 6.5% to 7% GDP growth, as some people are talking about, that will make him feel that he's going to get a lot more tax revenue. And if he feels he's going to get a lot more tax revenue, he's going to be spending more. So the three things that you've got to watch out for tomorrow: A, look at the deficit number. Secondly, C, is Mr. Chidambaram budgeting very aggressively for tax growth? If he's looking at growth of more than 13 to 14%, I think you should just assume that the budget is a huge fudge. If he's looking at a GDP growth of more than about 6.3% or so, you can be certain, you can just take it from me, you can be certain that he's going to have a problem with the deficit numbers as the year goes by. Thanks a lot. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.